Thank you, Mr Speaker. I'd like to start today by congratulating Mayor-elect Celia Wade-Brown. The special votes, the counting of the special votes has been finalised today, and Celia Wade-Brown has been elected the Mayor of our capital city, Wellington. It is an interesting development that both Wellington and Auckland, and also congratulations to Len Brown in Auckland, Wellington and Auckland are now led by mayors who support sustainable transport options. We now have the bizarre spectacle where the Minister of Transport is completely at odds with the leadership of two of the largest cities in our country, in Auckland and Wellington, and Hamilton as well, where pro-train councillors have been elected in Hamilton. Mr Speaker, we find ourselves in the situation where there is a spectre that is haunting the Minister of Transport, and that spectre is green transport options. For the first time, we find that leaders of our major urban centres are promoting sustainable transport options, while the Minister of Transport is locked in the 1950s with his idea that you can build motorways to reduce congestion. Well, building motorways does not reduce congestion. Building motorways induces more traffic and results in more congestion. As Transit used to famously say, all we ever do is move the congestion point. There is, in fact, one really good way to reduce congestion in our major urban centres, and the people who just voted in the local body elections in Auckland and Wellington and Hamilton and elsewhere have chosen that particular method, and that is mass public transport, and it's also active transport such as cycling and walking. Because when we build trains and train lines, when we build light rail, when we have more efficient bus services, when more people can walk or cycle to work, then we reduce the amount of traffic on roads. It is one of the paradoxes that the major beneficiaries, in fact, of more public transport are road users, because it frees up the roading network when more people move off the roads and into mass transit or active transport options. The other side of that, of course, is that it reduces our greenhouse emissions and makes our cities much more livable. New Zealand has very high transport greenhouse emissions. We've increased, I think, by about 70% since 1990, and that's connected to our obsession over the previous 10 years with building more and more motorways and inducing more and more traffic, and hence consuming more and more oil. It's also tied to the fact that oil is a finite resource. Just today, the Parliamentary Library released a paper which looked at some of the issues around oil, in which they concluded that oil was going to increase in price quite significantly, because they looked at the projections from internationally as well as domestically, and the impact that would have on our domestic transport options, because, of course, our domestic transport system is entirely dependent on oil, because we have thrown billions and billions of dollars at white elephant motorway projects instead of into sustainable transport options that actually have reduce oil use. So if we want to get home faster, then we would support the kind of options that people in Wellington and Hamilton have just voted for, better public transport. If we want to reduce our greenhouse emissions, we would support those options. If we want to reduce our dependence on oil, we would support those kind of sustainable transport options. And if we wanted to live in more sustainable and more livable cities, where we don't have giant motorways slicing and dicing our communities, then we would support those kind of sustainable transport options. And that's exactly what the people of Auckland and Wellington and elsewhere have just done. We now have the bizarre situation of conflict between central government, which is still dominated by people from the 1950s who think the solution to congestion is to build more motorways. We have the conflict between the 1950s thinking of Stephen Joyce and the National Party, conflict between that and what the people of Auckland and Wellington are desperately calling out for, because they're the ones that live in big urban centres and understand that you cannot build motorways, you cannot reduce congestion by building more and more motorways. That does not solve congestion. The urgent priorities in Wellington are around light rail, both to the airport and to the hospital. The urgent priorities in Auckland are around a train system that extends through the CBD loop and also out to the airport. Mr Speaker, this is a great day for green politics in New Zealand. It is a great day for everyone who supports sustainable transport options for Aotearoa New Zealand.
Michael Woodhouse.